everybody, this is Frankie, and this is the Francesco Abbruzzino News and Talk Show. This is a live show, unedited, unscripted. You get what I put out there. It is Monday through Friday from 9 to 10. And we cover the national news. I opine on some of the national news. And make sure you also catch my Saturday show, which is a local show on AM 930, where I cover many of the local issues. This weekend I have an interview with Julio Gonzalez, running for state rep for District 74. And I discuss a couple other issues in between the show, courtesy of philsgang.com. I'm always looking for people to help me out with the operations, so if you would visit my store at thefrancescoabbruzzino.com or theroguerant.com and check out the store for iodine, protein mixes, apparel, anything like that, we'd appreciate it. Now let's get over to the national news. We've got a few things to cover today, folks, so we're going to hop right into it. The first thing that I wanted to discuss on and touch on, though, is Obama and the neocons and their push for intervention amidst what many would call a foreign policy disaster. And we always know those blue-blooded neocons are always pushing for the war benefits. Their benefactors, which is the commercial industry that supports most of the war stuff out there, the GEs of the world. Now, the highest ranking general has died, the highest ranking one since 1970. He was murdered by Afghan military people that were there training. The U.S. was putting them through training. We see Iraq over there. It's imploding as elements of the globalist-backed rebels in Syria are butchering their way through to Baghdad. And they're seeking to exterminate minorities. We're seeing the videos constantly, cutting off heads of Christians. I just got done watching a video where they shot a bunch of Kurds in the back. Now Obama wants to step up. He started his bombing campaign. Many of the extremists in the Islamist world are armed with U.S. weapons. U.S. weapons, folks. Libya is in free fall after the UN-approved regime change. And that was brought on by Obama. We all remember Benghazi all too well. Meanwhile, almost half the weapons of war waged by Obama, almost half the weapons given to the globalist-backed governments in Afghanistan, have gone missing. They just disappeared into thin air, folks. Poof! Disappeared. Amazing. Amazing that this is happening. Amazing that there's no tracking system. Amazing that there's no command and control in these countries. And this is one of the reasons I was ranting, I think it was Friday, about foreign aid and giving it out to these corrupt governments with no check and balance in place. Or they would say there's check and balance, but the check and balance is of low quality. All over the world, though, the poison fruits of our interventionist foreign policy are becoming too obvious and too bloody to ignore. Ukraine, Syria, Palestinians right now in Gaza, and Israel, Iraq, the list goes on. The Obama administration and these blue-blooded neoconservatives, they're just out there pushing. They're pushing still for more war and further interventionism. Why? Without approval from Congress, too, they're going out there and initiating airstrikes on Iraq. Perhaps we should have pulled everybody out of there. Obama's perpetuated, he purported to authorize the supposedly limited airstrikes against the terrorists styling themselves as the Islamic State of Iraq, IS now. And he hasn't received any approval. Hundreds are dying from the bombings. Granted, they're these extremists. What's your thoughts on that? What do you think? Obama claimed the strikes were aimed at protecting the minority communities that fled to the mountains around Sinjar to avoid being massacred by this IS group. But defying the U.S. Constitution requirement for wars to be declared by Congress, he said he did it for our national interest. What national interest, folks? What do people on top of the hilltop have to do with my national interest? For humanitarian reasons, should we be doing this? I appreciate that, yes. We hate to see this happen. But we should have stepped up way before this got out of control. Obama's vowed not to get the U.S. involved in yet another war in Iraq. However, with the U.S. military advisors flooding in, the American fighter jets off there dropping bombs everywhere, it seems to be more of a question of semantics, doesn't it? The GOP establishment has always also been out there pushing for deeper involvement in Iraq. Why? McCain, the war hawk McCain, he wants to go off and fight everywhere. In Afghanistan, meanwhile, the situation's quickly gone from bad to worse, especially with Harold Green, the general who was just killed. The whole nation could be on the verge of chaos. Ongoing dispute in recent presidential elections has not helped. Neither has U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry over their meddling. This guy's an idiot. We continue to put these politically connected people, John Kerry, the Hillary Clintons of the world, into a position that they shouldn't be in, folks. The release of weapons accountability audit by the Special Inspector General in Afghan, the CGAR. According to the findings, 43% of the weapons that have been sent to Afghanistan security forces by us cannot be found, unaccounted for. Poof, thin air, they're gone. The lost arms could be in the hands of terrorists. They could be in the hands of the Taliban, drug traffickers, the black market, you name it. But congressional neocons, meanwhile, are seizing. They're seizing on the escalating problems in Afghanistan to seek greater U.S. government involvement. In these troubled lands that teeter on the verge of implosion, following more than a decade of U.S. meddling. We have seen it time and time again, folks. The group Obama is now bombing, ISIS, which is fighting in the same side as various Obama-backed Islamist groups out of Syria, have already overrun vast swaths of Iraq. As I said, the situation is becoming dire. Reports from sources of the ground suggest that many have died already. Tens of thousands, as I said, of Christians are fleeing, or they're getting their heads chopped off. Ancient destruction to Christian communities in Iraq. In a seemingly bizarre twist, the Iranian regime forces have sent in, I think it was 2,000 Iranians into Iraq. What do you think about that? And they're now fighting on the same side as Obama in Iraq, with both governments taking on ISIS. It should be abundantly clear by now that interventionist U.S. foreign policy has played a major role in setting the Middle East and much of the world ablaze, rather than responding to it with still more intervention. All we're asking is that Congress should, what? Obey the Constitution? Is that too much to ask? Obey the Constitution? And follow the advice of our founding fathers? Individual Americans and groups concerned about the humanitarian crisis can and should help by supporting the broad-range aid efforts and not going and declaring more wars. Now, next, we're going to go into a Rogue Rant. I covered the other day some consulting, and I went on and on about my diatribe on consulting fees. Actually, that was on my local show. Sorry, national. I'm on my national now. But this pertains to national issues, too. It's happening throughout the nation, where governments, city, county, state, federal, are relying on these constitutions to do the jobs that we sent the politicians there to do and that we're paying full-time government employees to do. Then they're getting all this advice and they're not adhering to it. After I put this rant out, the latest one was just spend $2 million on, basically up to $2 million on what we call the 2050 plan here in Sarasota, on controlling urban sprawl. Now they want to change that. You got a few commissioners, people running for the commission seat that want to change it and basically ignore what the consultant put out. So we're going to jump over to my rant and just hold on 1 second.
Hey everybody, this is Francesco Abbruzzino. I'm coming live and unedited with another Rogue Rant. What am I ranting about today? Municipalities and consulting fees. This is something that drives me nuts. City and county commissions need to wise up and take a closer look at the money taxpayers spend on private consultants. It isn't always the concept of hiring an outside expert that is flawed. It can often be a good thing. Rather, cities and counties must tighten up and see what the public is getting for their money. And is it worth it? Just recently, the city of Venice spent over $200,000 last year on consulting fees. And that is only on the consultants that I can uncover because there's not a true way to track them. That brought us the basic results that they were already aware of at the city level because of their city employees doing a great job. In the case of once a week pickup garbage consultant, he came up with the same exact analysis as the city employees. The traffic consultant for parking came up with back-end parallel parking, which the residents rose up against as a foolish concept. The county has spent over $120,000 on a homeless consultant that gave us a 12-point plan that the experts basically already knew about. The problem is not knowing the solution, it's the implementation of the solution between all the cities and county. Often political entities are turning to consultants as a way to show their constituents that they're trying to solve the issue. And it gives them political cover, folks. What are we getting? Glossary reports that stating the most obvious, as pointed out by their employees, signage, paintwork, lighting, and whatever else comes with the recommendation? So, why employ consultants when they know the major problem is? Well, I appreciate they will come up with other recommendations such as promotions, etc. But why not discuss how to move forward with ideas that have not been considered by the cities? If they can't after the analysis, then we should not owe them a dime. Why are we paying thousands upon thousands of dollars to consultants to come back and tell us what we already know? I was told many years ago that if you are in charge of a business or the head of a department and you have to employ consultants, you are not fit for the position you hold. Isn't that why we elect the politicians and pay the county/city employees? They are there to come up with solutions and manage the government entities. Why the hell do they need to bring in consultants? After all, like I said, that's what we elected them for. That's why they're city employees. That's why they have a job, to come up with the solutions. How many of our government officials have ever worked in a business or owned a business? How many of them have ever had to worry about profits and loss? If they did do any of this, would they be hiring a consultant? Or would they try to figure it out by themselves with the talent they have within their company or team, in this case, their governmental entity? I am sick and tired of the politicians throwing millions of dollars at politically connected consultants who are doing the same job that the city workers are doing, but for 2, 3, 4 times the cost. Then they are coming up with the same damn answers as the city workers. Millions of dollars down the drain, folks. Money that could be used for needed repairs throughout the community or services to help the families that are barely making it by within our communities. I say it's time to wake up and smell the coffee. Start using the resources that are available within the different government entities and stop spending our taxpayer dollars on frivolous consulting fees. This has been Francesco Abbruzzino with another live and unedited
Rogue Rant. You can catch us. I haven't done a daily rant at theroguerant.com in about a week. Not sure why. I've been busy with the radio show and stuff. I did want to put out too, and I forgot to, if you're on Facebook and you go to my Educate, Inspire, and Change Facebook page. Actually, no, the Francesco Abbruzzino Live News and Talk Show page. I'm on there. You can email me questions. If you have a question that you want to throw out there, since I do have the phone line down right now, just go there, shoot me an email. I'll see it pop up, and we'll go ahead and try to address it if we can't. I'm going to cut to a quick commercial while I prepare the next news. back, and right now we're going to discuss ISIS, and how some of our biggest allies are out there funding this group. As we all know, ISIS got their start. Basically, they were too extreme for Al-Qaeda, so they splintered off, and they basically have been over in Syria, fighting over there. The U.S., although many people don't know it here in the States, has been basically supplying them arms, and there's videos out there, just Google it, for the rebels in Syria for their fight. Also, they've been getting the backing of Israel, Saudi Arabia, and there's another country that's primarily involved in there. I can't think of it offhand. Now, on the other side, on the flip side, the Syrian government has been getting the backing of Russia, Iran, Turkey, you name it. And Turkey almost was trying to do a black flag that got caught on the phone discussing a black flag attempt to basically go in and bomb this one area that they control in Syria as a ruse to get out there and start attacking Syria. So that's where ISIS basically is known for getting their primary start. Now, jump forward, folks. Where we at? Al-Qaeda in the big trouble. But here's the issue. The United States' biggest allies are funding ISIS. And we are supporting financially with weapons and everything else these allies. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, and Turkey. They're all funding ISIS. And why? You know, as President Obama authorized the airstrikes on ISIS, we need to think about this. It reminds ourselves which countries are bankrolling this deadly terror group. And the answers, like I said, are the Saudi Arabias, the Kuwaits, Turkeys, Qatar. 3 of the United States' biggest allies in the region are out there financially supporting ISIS. Why? Because they are bitter enemies. Saudi Arabia, bitter enemies with Iran. Obama announced these limited airstrikes to slow the advance of ISIS fighters and help members of the Yazidi religious minority group up in Kurdistan. They've been forced to flee into the mountainous regions in northern Iraq to avoid the slaughter. That, I applaud them. A little late, but I applaud them. The administration has failed to put pressure on several Gulf states that are directly responsible for helping out ISIS, though. And they're gaining a foothold in Iraq in the first place. They wouldn't be there without all this financial backing. ISIS and Syria are now threatening Baghdad. ISIS and Syria. They were funded for years by wealthy donors in Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, ourselves. In addition to funding itself through criminal activity and punitive taxes imposed on the local population on pain of death, ISIS relies on a steady stream of income from countries that have bankrolled their extremist thoughts, their extremist agenda. Islamists for years have been faced with zero backlash from the White House, be it Republicans or Democrats. Even evidence of direct Saudi involvement in 9/11 failed to generate any reconsideration of whom America is calling their friends, folks. Why is this? How come we're not hearing about this? Why isn't major media discussing it? State backing for ISIS prompted Iraq Prime Minister Nouri al-Awlaki to point the finger directly at Saudi Arabia and Qatar during a France 24-hour interview. He's another idiot. But I don't know why we've left him or helped him stay in office for so long. In failing to call these countries to account for funding of ISIS, the White House has deliberately placed the importance of isolating Iran and Syria over and above the stability of the entire region. So they're over there and they're trying to isolate. This is the irony. They're trying to isolate Iran, yet they're working hand in hand with Iran to come in and fight ISIS. It's crazy. Some evidence suggests that the U.S. even trained some of these Islamists who went on to join ISIS at a secret base in Jordan back in 2012. Turkey's known to train the ISIS fighters at a location near their Incirlik air base. It's near Adana, I believe. According to Shiite sources close to Minister al-Maliki of Iraq, Obama administration has turned a blind eye to the fact that Turkey was equipping and then sending the fighters to Syria before they went into Iraq. So, basically, whether or not the humanitarian airstrikes in Iraq are really aimed at stopping the terror wrought by the ISIS, or merely a part of a ploy to create a justification for a long-awaited attack on Syria, the White House itself, as well as some of America's closest supposed allies, all share some of the blame in aiding to the growth of ISIS in the region. But you're not seeing that in major media. You're not hearing it anywhere. But you're hearing it here on your alternative news source. And that's why alternative news is so important out there. We're going to jump over to Facebook. Facebook, I deleted this app this weekend. And you know what? As I deleted the app, I was wondering if I basically have agreed to the same terms that I'm going to show you here by downloading Facebook itself onto my iPhone. But basically, this guy, Nick Russo, put out a story, and it's on the Facebook app and some of the violations that you may be seeing. You know, we all probably use Facebook on your phone. And basically, every time, and I noticed after I deleted it today, I went through and I was sending an email through normal Facebook on my iPhone. And it came up and said, hey, you don't have Messenger service. Do you want Messenger service? I'm like, no, because I deleted it. But a lot of us have been sending messages from Facebook's app, Messenger. And probably always ask you if you want to install another Messenger app if you don't have it on there. It's always been an option, though. But coming soon to your Facebook experience, it won't be an option anymore, folks. God. It will be mandatory if you care to send a message from your phone. That's right, it's going from being optional to mandatory. You may think, well, what's the big deal, Frank? I don't care. No big deal, one might think. But what Facebook's users don't realize is that permission that you give Facebook. And here's a couple of permissions that this guy wrote about. You change the state of the network connectivity. That means that Facebook can change or alter your connection to the internet or cell service. You're basically giving them permission. Call phone numbers and send SMS messaging. That means that Facebook wants to, it can send a text message to your contacts on your behalf. Do you see any trouble with this? Who is Facebook to be able, who are they to be able to take and access your contacts and then message them via your phone? But you're basically giving them that right. Record audio and take pictures and videos anytime. Record audio, take pictures at any time. That means that the folks at Facebook can see through your lens of your phone whenever they want. They can listen to what you're saying via your microphone and do whatever they want with this information. They can read your phone's call log, including information about incoming and outgoing calls. Who have you been calling? How long did you talk to them? They can read your contact data, including who you call and email and how often. Clear violation of your privacy, I would think. What say you? Do you want them out there with this information? Especially with how they have been working closely with NSA. We're basically giving them any information they want. They can read your personal profile information stored in your device. That means if you have an address, personal information, pictures, or anything else near and dear to you in your personal life, they can go in and read it. Another violation of your privacy. Some people are fine with it, though. You can get a list of accounts known by the phone or other apps. Facebook will now have a tally of all your apps you use, how often you use them, and the information you're exchanging on them. Now, hopefully, if you're listening to this, you're taking this as seriously as I am. With these kinds of privacy invasions, I think Facebook is pushing the limits to what people will let them get away with. But I got to tell you, don't get away with it, folks, because most individuals out there aren't aware of this. Most individuals out there don't listen to alternative media. They will think we're quacks, we're crazies, because you're out there communicating actual documented information. And a lot of times you'll see major media might pick this up on a back page. They won't put it on the front page. Sometimes they will. There may be no turning back at this point, though, folks, because many people, like I said, will not read this or investigate the permission of Facebook's new mandatory app. They won't hear me communicating it. You won't see anything out there. And it's a shame. A shame that our privacy our rights are slowly being whittled away at. Little by little, they're disappearing. Now we're going over to the $619 billion, which have been missed from federal transparency. If the government website intended to make federal spending more transparent has been missing $619 billion from 302 different federal programs. This was concluded after an audit. And the data that does exist is widely inaccurate, according to the GAO. Only 2 to 7% of the spending on data at usaspending.gov is consistent with agency records. I had a flash. Among the data missing from this is 6-year-old website is the Department's Health and Human Services failed to report $554 billion, mostly in direct assistance programs like Medicare. Small change. Chump change, right? $544 billion. Why should we be so concerned? The Department of Interior did not report spending for 163 of the 265 assistant programs because they said the accounting system were not compatible with data formats. This only resulted in a small $5.3 billion in spending that's been missing from the White House. And these are just a few of the issues out there, folks, just a few. How do you feel about that? We need to crack down on government and all this frivolous, wasteful spending. It's not unlike the consulting fees, where they go out there, they take on these consultants, ask them for their advice. They throw out $120,000, $2 million of our hard-earned dollars, and they could care less. What sucks about this is the American taxpayers aren't paying attention. They see what's happening, and they're dumbed down. Like I said, they're dumbed down from too much fluoride in their water. They're too busy trying to see what's up on the next reality show. You know, and my family is guilty of it as anyone. I sit out there, I'll watch my wife and daughters, and they're constantly watching these reality shows. It drives me crazy. Whereas I'm more of a guy that goes in and looks at different documentaries and news shows. And they're not up on the issues. They take whatever's out there as being law. If Obama says this, that's law. It must be happening. It must be accurate. What say you? What do you think about all this? We're going to go to a quick commercial. We're going to come back and we're going to talk Ebola. Okay, this is Frankie, and I am back. Hopefully you're enjoying this national news hour that I'm bringing you. Basically, the idea is to introduce alternative news that's not being discussed in major media. Some of it will be touched on in major media, but I try to hit on it first, like this Ebola story. I've been doing this show basically since December. I brought this issue up back, I think it was March or whenever it was. You really weren't hearing anything from major media. You didn't hear anything until about April, when there were about 100 deaths. And now you're hearing more and more about it. But unfortunately, major media is putting a spin on it like you should all be freaked out. With caution, because it won't come here. It's strange how they're introducing it. I wanted to cover a few aspects of it, though. And one of them is martial law. What will it look like? And to get a perspective of what Ebola martial law will look like, we just have to look over Sierra Leone or Liberia, because there, troops have been deployed. The country is in martial law lockdown. It's just no one in mainstream media is calling what it is. You don't hear about martial law. You don't hear about lockdown. You might hear that troops are out there trying to control the things, but let's call it what it is. The Liberian president has officially declared a 90-day state of emergency. And with that, those lucky citizens, get to lose some of their liberties. They'll be suspended. But hey, we're doing it all for the benefit of the rest of the citizens. And I get it, it's a hard one. You don't want people spreading Ebola everywhere, but then you want to be cautious and not take away civil liberties. Especially with the edict that President Obama put out the other day, which I'll cover, where if you just basically have a cough and you could just have a cold, he can use that as a reason for quarantining you. Back over to Sierra Leone. Military forces also deployed there as part of Operation Octopus, which is officially aimed to prevent the unauthorized movement of Ebola-infected persons, which I get, I understand. This martial law, and in the case of Sierra Leone, martial law will really have, they'll call it either by some creepy name or by the martial law, but people won't understand the depths of it. They won't understand that civil liberties will be suspended with military force. And what else? National Health Workers Association President Joseph Tamba says that this emergency, this state of emergency, is necessary. But he says that people should be given advance notice to buy food ahead of the movement restrictions, which they weren't there. So preppers, something that Obama has basically said, you got to watch them, they may be extremists. But they don't want people out there getting the food prior to. They're not giving them warnings. They're just saying you're in lockdown. So civil liberties were suspended, and they didn't give the average person who isn't prepper-minded adequate time to be prepared. So they're in lockdown, they don't have food, they don't have adequate supplies, and they're living under martial law. Relatives are hiding feverish patients at home over fear that they may be brought into isolation centers because they're with these feverish patients. They may be considered having Ebola. People are just dumping dead bodies in the streets and taking off over that same fear. They don't want to be whisked away and quarantined. Experts warn that extreme measures risk driving patients and their families further underground over fear. And they say the best way to track it is through the local leaders. So what's going on right now in Africa is really on-the-ground glimpse into how governments implement martial law and how they respond to people with these similar types of situations. And will we see it happen here? People in West Africa are basically staying the hell away from government isolation centers and hospitals, as I would. People there believe that it's a government conspiracy. How many Americans would feel the same way about this going on right now? Knowing our own government, Fort Detrick biowarfare scientist, who just so happened to have been over in the Ebola hot zone in the main 3 Ebola-ravaged countries, testing their own lab-grown antibody cocktail for human adults. How do you think they'd feel? How do you think they feel? By executive order, our government currently has a laundry list of infectious diseases for which the CDC states it has the legal authority to detain any person who may be afflicted with cholera, diphtheria, infectious TB, plague, smallpox, yellow fever, Ebola-like symptoms, SARS, the list goes on. And I want to stress here that CDC says it can legally detain anyone if the person may have these diseases. Not if the person has officially definitely been diagnosed, just if they think the person has it. On the top of that, the Pentagon is all over this experimental Ebola treatment, which has been grown in tobacco cells that has just been approved for human testing. How do you feel about that? Ebola cases have shown up to 5 African countries, and now America and Spain are flying Ebola victims over to here, over to Spain, over to the U.S. Calm down and take a deep breath, they say. And we should, but we should not ignore what's going on. The mainstream media and their mind-controlling 24/7 news cycle is whipping the average person into a state of panic. The government has made sure of this by flying 2 Ebola people over here, just in case the idea of Ebola coming home didn't actually hit home hard enough. And so I ask, what are your thoughts on this? Losing one's mind with irrational fear is different from looking critically and logically at a situation and gleaming what's different from it. Look to Africa now. Look at how the government has responded to their people throughout this Ebola crisis and how the people are responding to the situation they find themselves in. What I suggest to you is that you stay vigilant, everyone. False flags are not a conspiracy theory by any means, and you need to remember that. You need to remember that. But the U.S. Centers for Disease Control's own a patent on Ebola. Did you know that? You did if you've been watching this show. It's called Ebolabon. It's patent number CA 2741523A1, awarded back in 2010. The patient summary says the invention provides the isolated human Ebola virus donated by Ebolabon deposited with the CDC. I bet many people aren't aware of that. Why do they have this patent? That's a good question out there. How about vaccines? Well, a lot of people are worried that the government may use this as a logic, as a reasoning to put and shoot us up with vaccines. Many people are already concerned and worried about what's in the vaccines, and rightfully so. If you Google a lot of stories out there, the government would come in with a story that they're doing vaccines, but would put other drugs into them, shooting up individuals. It happened a lot in Africa. So what will you do if they make it mandatory? As that Ebola death toll rises, images of bodies being abandoned in the streets of Liberia, they're broadcast all around the world. There has been a growing outcry for the scientific community to do something about it. Do something about this deadly virus before it kills more individuals. And as luck would have it, there's an experimental Ebola vaccine that the government has ready to be tested on humans if Ebola starts spreading here. Will you be the first in line? People will be clamoring to get to it, I bet, but we'll be safe. The government will sell it as being safe, as they've done so with so many other vaccines. And the mainstream media doesn't keep out, or mainstream media does a great job at keeping out the details of some of the issues with many of these vaccines. If the outbreak gets bad enough, folks, will it be made mandatory at some point? If they do make it mandatory for all Americans to take, what will you do? Will you sit there and say, I'm not going to take it? Do you think your neighbors are going to appreciate the fact that you're not going to take it? Are they going to isolate you because you haven't taken it? Is that going to be your scarlet letter? Many people will not be satisfied to just get the vaccine themselves. They will want everyone living near them in their communities to get vaccinated as well, as the sake of the herd immunity. So, could politicians make Ebola vaccine mandatory for all Americans? Many states have laws providing for mandatory vaccinations. I bet you didn't know that. And this is during public health emergencies or outbreaks of communicable diseases. If a person refuses, guess what? They can be locked up. Barack Obama himself, he seems to believe that he has the power through the presidency, and that's virtually endless. And what we have already seen is him sign a series of frightening executive orders. He just signed the one that I referred to earlier that gives the power to apprehend and detain Americans that show any symptoms of a disease associated with fever and signs of symptoms of pneumonia or any other respiratory illness. Is this right? Is this a violation of our rights? It would seem like it would be too much more of a stretch for him to sign an executive order requiring everybody to get this vaccination. And I can tell you, on my sites, people are adamantly against it. And then you got to think of the companies that are going to benefit from this. What ties do they have to this Obama? You know, the company that makes the experimental drug, MAP Biopharmaceutical, they stand to make a ton of money. If Ebola does indeed turn out to be some horrific global health crisis, there will be opportunities for all these companies to come in and make a pretty penny. And I can guarantee you, they will be all over it. And what's funny about this is the Ebola vaccine pioneers, they were joking about the use of a genetically engineered virus to cull human population. What we call it is depopulation. And a lot of extremists out there talk about it. You may find it hard to believe, but a lot of people behind the scenes consider options for depopulation: war, virus, famine. But they had this story out there, and it was entitled "The Edible Vaccine Inventor," and how he was joking about culling population with GMO viruses. This is Dr. Charles Arntzen. He's the head of the Biodesign Institute of Infectious Disease and Vaccinology. He was answering a question about how to kill off billions of humans in a depopulation scheme. He said, should there be 8 billion people in the world? Is there a limit to the number of people on our planet that we can sustain? How do we go about this lightly? And should we concern ourselves with feeding 8 billion people in the first place? Or should we natural forces carrying capacity and effect or limit growth control? Basically, he's talking about growth, depopulation. Bill and Linda Gates, they talked about this. The video keeps getting taken down, but they said, hey, vaccines could help lower the human population by 10 to 15%. The mass murder of nearly 2 billion people with a GMO virus is no laughing matter, folks. Only in the realm of infectious disease bioweapons and tainted vaccines does someone openly laugh and joke about murdering 2 billion people with some genetically engineered virus. This is much more than a joke. Globalist leaders frequently talk about this. This is part of their plan for their mind of saving the planet. This doctor goes even further, stating that genetic engineering scientists should create a better virus that will kill billions of human beings. Look it up. Google it. It's on record, folks. This is how people think. And keep in mind that this is just one of such things that people are developing for Ebola vaccines, which increasingly look like they're forced upon American people in outbreaks like the one that they're expecting from Ebola. So that's why Ebola is being fast-tracked. That's why Obama's signing orders, executive orders for quarantining. What we really are witnessing right now with the Ebola outbreak is the fast track. The fast track. Ebola vaccine in the U.S. is in preparation of mandatory vaccination campaign combined with a gunpoint quarantine operation backed by a new executive order that Obama just signed. Think about it. They're fast tracking it. That executive order says that the federal government can forcibly detain and quarantine you. Like I said, just for coughing. It's all something we should be concerned about, folks. We should be concerned about indeed. Let's cut to a quick commercial. I'll be right back. Everybody, and I'm back now, and I wanted to touch upon Obama, and I put on my document that I use to basically bullet point, and then it gives me documents to pull up and reference as I'm talking to you guys. So if you do seem distracted, one thing I should have told you, many people already know this that are new to the show, this is a one-man show. I basically am doing all the research, all the technical aspects, and the hosting. But this I called him Obama the Goof, and it's his doctrine of pretending to give a damn until he really has to. And I took some information from Ben Shapiro, and he's basically questioned, what is the Obama doctrine? His allies have labeled the Obama doctrine a form of realism about the limits of American power. His critics have labeled the Obama doctrine leading from behind. Obama came up with his own definition of the Obama doctrine, We're only one nation. The problem that we confront, whether it's drug cartels, climate change, terrorism, you name it, can be solved just by one country. And Obama believes it's him and the United States. The Obama doctrine has been difficult to pin down because doesn't seem to be a common thread uniting his disparate policies. Obama's latest decision to launch aircraft against the Islamic State, ISIS. The Obama doctrine has now come into focus, folks. Pretending to give a damn about suffering of innocents when it hits the headlines, ignore it the rest of the time. That's his doctrine. Obama doesn't truly care, does he? He's a master of emotional manipulation, capable of achieving effective posturing when it comes to the suffering of the innocent. Any deployment of power will be short-term and basically ineffective. But Obama will do all he can for the innocent up until the moment when he doesn't have to do it anymore. Then he'll let them sit there and die. That was certainly the case in Egypt, where Obama expressed extraordinary optimism about the ouster of Mubarak, then promptly allowed the Muslim Brotherhood extremist group to take over. He has since spent efforts attempting to undercut the Egyptian military. Why? It has been the case in Iran, where Obama belatedly denounced the treatment of democracy protesters, then did nothing to help them while they were out in the streets. He left them hanging. Ukraine, where Vladimir Putin has annexed Crimea and invaded eastern Ukraine. Obama has expressed outrage. Putin has scoffed. The rebel forces have shot down a passenger airliner to approximate zero effect. Action from the West. Nigeria, where after expressing upset over Boko Haram's kidnapping of innocent girls. Have you heard anything about that lately, folks? No, they haven't been rescued. You're just not hearing about it. Ensuring the State Department endorses the power of hashtag, the Obama administration has done precisely nothing. Those poor girls are still hostages, and major media has forgotten about them. Syria, where Obama assured the world that should dictator Bashar al-Assad cross a red line and use chemicals of mass destruction, there would be consequences. There were none. Fortunately, because it has later been revealed that it may have been the rebels that did it, and not Assad. A black flag, you might say. Now, Obama's done the same in Iraq. He will drop a few bombs. He will bluster about it. Then the world's attention will turn to some other crisis, and Obama will blithely move on, leaving erstwhile allies to die. Obama has always cared more about appearance than in reality. He's a politician. Isn't that what politicians do? Not really. Not really, folks. And it's something to think about with President Obama. The immigration problem continues to go on. And what I always say when I start to talk about immigration is, hey, look, my father immigrated here. My aunts, my Zil, my Nona, Zia, all of them. But they did it legally. So I have no problem with immigration. What I do have a problem with is illegal immigration. Border Patrol agents and the Obama admin are now releasing murders into the U.S. So it's gone a little bit beyond the illegal aspect. Now we're looking at actual murders and gang members that are coming here. They interviewed this guy. This was written by Warren Mass, and he interviewed this guy, Chris Cabrera, who told Fox News on August 6th that the federal government is allowing for murders from Central America to be released. He stated that among the illegal children or teenage gang members who are being released to family members in America, if they have family in the U.S., release them to the family, even if they're admitted gang leaders. And many of them are admitting it. They've had a couple say, hey, I've killed some people back in my home country. They were 17, 16 years old. The government says, hey, release him to their parents. Even if he's a confirmed gang member, a confirmed criminal by self-admission, they have to release them. This loophole, Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008, Bush signed it, enacted to prevent victims of child trafficking from being automatically sent back to those who had effectively enslaved them. Law requires that children entering our country illegally be granted a court appearance. It was meant to be a good thing, but there's that loophole in it. And some immigration courts have a backlog of 3 to 5 years. And many of the people, 90% of them, do not come back once given the slip to reappear. Sorry, had a slight distraction with my producer. While the influx of unaccompanied minors has often been described as a humanitarian crisis, which is not accurate when applied to younger children, 16 and 17-year-old gang members, to invite these violent young criminals to become residents of the U.S. is a gesture of humanitarianism. It's a naive exercise at best, folks. It seems that simple common sense would dictate that today's illegal immigrants would also be screened for such factors. But from all reports, our borders are being overrun, and there is no orderly process to control this invasion. So what say you? Should it be allowed? Okay, folks, that's been my Monday show. I got to go up and tape some promo stuff for my local show that airs on Saturdays. And that's later today, plus do my work at Telephonics. Remember to visit my store at thefrancescoabbruzzino.com. Longevity, it's a great protein. It gives you all those 90 essential proteins and vitamins out there. Iodine, I take it myself, and you could get that at the InfoWars one. I got X2 iodine. It no longer comes in your salt, folks. It's out of your salt. Fluoride, it's tired of being dumbed down. Take some Fluoride Shield. Got it all going on here, folks. Or check out my apparel. Besides having the Educate, Inspire, and Change material there, apparel, we also have stuff for my local scoop pages, which I run local media operations on. And that's it. Everybody, have a great day.